Good morning.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Hi. Good morning.
Hello and welcome to vià Sophie, the web radio of our high school, Sophie Berthelot in Calais.
Today we have the great pleasure to welcome Eddy Harris, a famous American writer known for his deep explorations of identity and race through travel.
His key work, Mississipi Solo, where he traveled down the Mississippi River, reveals unique insights into American society.
Harris turns travel into a quest for identity, offering vital perspectives on understanding oneself and others.
Today, he's here in our studio to answer a few questions about his life and his work, and especially his first book, Mississipi Solo.
Enjoy listening.
Hello Eddy, thank you for meeting us and answering our questions. How are you, Eddy?
Good morning, Agathe. I am fine.
We are very happy to have you with us today. Some of us want to become writers, so to hear you will be a gift for us. Cécily, Louanne and Lisa will now interview you.
Why did you want to become a writer? What inspired you to write your book, Mississipi Solo?
Hola. I became a writer because I'm good at it and because I didn't want to do anything else. When I finished university, I had a job. I hated having a job. And I decided then that I was going to take my chances and become a writer.
How did you get ideas to write books about your travels?
Well, first came the travel. This first book, Mississipi Solo, I did this journey not to write a book about it. I did the journey because I wanted to change my life. I was living a period of failure, and I wanted to do something to get out of that malaise that I was feeling. And I thought canoeing the Mississippi River was a good way to do it. Something dangerous, something physical, and something that I thought was important. And then I decided to write the book about it. I took the trip first, and then came the idea to write the book. And I wanted to write the book because what was happening to me was so important that I wanted to remember it and then possibly to share it. And when you write, especially if you write about your memories, which is what this kind of is, you get a chance to relive what you did, and you get a chance to think about it, and you get a chance to try to understand it. And that's what writing this book was about for me. Understanding what that journey was and what it did for me.
How does traveling influence your writing process? Are there any specific places or experiences that particularly influence your work?
The place that influences my work the most is the U.S., even if I'm not there. Because even when I'm writing about Africa or writing about living in Paris, somehow it reflects upon the life I had or could have in the USA. So that's the place that resonates the most in my writing. Even when I'm not writing about the US, it still somehow comes back to America.
As an African-American person...
As a Black American, I hate that term African-American.
Sorry, as a Black American, how has your own identity shaped your perspective as a writer or a documentary filmmaker?
I think it influences my life as a human. The fact that I am Black and the fact that I am Black living principally in white societies, white America, white France, white Europe. Even when I'm traveling in Africa, I'm still a Black American in those different contexts. And the context changes even though the Blackness does not. So being Black, kind of like being American, is always a reflection on what I'm doing, who I am and what I'm doing. It's not that I want to escape it, but I can't escape it. And I know that when people see me, the first thing they see is a Black person. So my interaction with them is based first on their first impression. And then it becomes the ping pong match of how do we change that impression and how does that impression affect the conversation that we're having and the interaction that we're having. And how does all of that affect me? And that's the most important part. How does being Black and American affect who I am? And in some ways, it doesn't, except that I know that in the eyes of other people, I am an American and I am Black.
In your second book, Native Stranger, you explore Africa. How has this experience changed your perception of Africa and its cultural heritage?
First of all, the reason I don't like the term African American is that having traveled in Africa for a year, I realized that I am not African. I am an American. I'm an American who happens to be black. And that is not the same as being an African American. Calling myself or us calling ourselves African American implies a certain cultural connection to Africa, which we do not have. An Italian American, I think that's just as absurd, but at least an Italian American can, in many cases, trace his ancestry to a particular place in Italy. There is no way that I could trace my ancestry to a particular place in Africa. I have an easier time tracing my roots to Pays de Galles, to Wales, than I do in Africa, because one of my ancestors is Welsh, and I can trace him much more easily than I can trace anybody from Africa. So I don't know why. So part of the reaction I have to this being an African American and my reaction to the trip in Africa is I left Africa knowing that I am not African. I'm an American.
How do you see the evolution of race and identity issues in the United States in the last 40 years?
It's devolving, partly because we have fallen into this sort of sectarian ethos where I'm supposed to be black and only black, and gays are supposed to be gay and only gay, and Italians or white people are supposed to be only what they're supposed to be, and it's ridiculous. We have lost a sense of commonality. Somebody asked me earlier today what I thought about the internet. One of the problems with the internet is we stay in our own little cocoons. There is no commonality. When I was a kid, we had 3 TV channels. Everybody watched the same television shows. When you went to school the next day, you had these things that you could talk about in common. Now, maybe there's some commonality, but not the same way that it was when I was a kid. We don't share the cultural space the way we used to.
What is the best way to start writing, in your opinion?
Buy a pencil and get some paper.
What does it take to become a writer?
A pencil and some paper.
Okay.
And also having something to say. It helps if you have something to say, and it's easier to have something to say if you have lived a life that has some meaning to it. Emily Dickinson, a great American poet, basically never left her bedroom. She was still a great poet, but she would have been an even greater poet if she had had a life, an external life. So I think what we need as writers is an internal life as well as an external life, something that we can build on and write about. Experience, I guess, is the word.
What project are you currently working on? What do you want to do next?
I'm working right now on a book about immigration, trying to explore my life as an immigrant living in France and the courage that is necessary for immigrants to do what they do. And not necessarily in my case, because being an American, it is easy to move from America to France. There were no obstacles in my way. But if I were coming from Syria or from Afghanistan or from someplace in Africa, it's different. I met a woman last year who had, from Nigeria, who eventually moved to France, but she had to sell everything she owned in order to do it. And because of the political climate that she was leaving, she can't go home. As an American, if I want to go home tomorrow, I can go home tomorrow. Well, I should not use the word home because my home is in France. But if I wanted to go back to the U.S., I could go back. I could go back to live. I could go back to visit. I could go back every 2 days if I had enough money and wanted to do it. There are people who move from one place to another who do not get that opportunity because of the political and economic situations in which they live. It takes a lot of courage. And we talk about the economic immigrant, but we never talk about how difficult it is for those people to do what they do. And that's what I would like to talk about in this next book.
Do you think France is a good place to live? Is it better than the United States? And what culture and identity differences do you perceive?
Is it a better place than the U.S.? Better and worse are relative terms. I can't say. It's great for me because I love it here, which is why I'm here. And if I didn't like it here, I'd be someplace else. The biggest problem I have in France, culturally, politically, any kind of way, is priorité à droite. It is absolutely absurd. I want you to change it, please. It makes no sense to me.
I understand.
Other than that, being in France is great.
Okay.
Have some meetings with high school students been particularly influential to you?
All of my meetings with high school students influence me. Partly because I get to see my childhood. I relive my high school days when I'm in a high school. I can see earlier this morning, I was with a class, and one of my best friends from high school was in that class. It was just amazing. I was talking to him. I'm looking at this guy. He's a spitting image of this really good friend of mine. So it partly brings me back to my youth. What it also does, which is probably more important, it helps me focus my thoughts. I spend most of my time alone. And when I'm in a group setting like this, and people ask me questions, even if I get the same questions, the answers are not always the same. And it forces me to reflect and to focus a little bit on what I think and what I feel. Otherwise, you just sort of go through on superficially, and you're not really involved in what you think you think.
In conclusion, would you like to add anything?
No, nothing more than abolish priorité à droite.
Thank you for sharing your precious time and this moment with us. We are all very happy to have met you. It's been wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you all.
That's all for today. We'll be back soon with another episode. In the meantime, stay tuned to vià Sophie. Bye!
See you soon!